Hello and welcome back to On Guard Solutions. Today, as we continue our series on field stripping and cleaning weapons, I thought that it would make sense to do an AK-47, one of the most popular rifles in the entire world, I'm sure. And so I was fortunate enough to get my hands on this AK-47. It is an Arsenal SLR-101S 7.62 by 39, and what a beauty it is. Milled receiver, black polymer furniture, muzzle brake, chrome line cold hammer forged barrel to help with accuracy. And what a beauty she is. The milled receiver, adds some weight, makes it feel super beefy in the hand. This particular model from Arsenal was originally made in Bulgaria. The SLR-101S is since been discontinued, but nonetheless a fantastic weapon. The AK-47 is reliable and accurate. I know as Americans we're supposed to be fans of the AR-15, as I am, but I have to say, if things went sideways, I would have to seriously consider taking an AK-47 into the weeds for sure. No doubt about it. So yeah, this particular one's been discontinued, but still great. I've often joked with my friends and other folks that I know along the way that if you could load rocks into an AK-47, I'm pretty sure it would shoot them. And of course, I'm joking, but super reliable. Never had any issues out of any AK-47 I've shot. This one's no exception to that. Just a fantastic weapons platform for sure. And one that we're going to field strip for you today and clean. So stick around. Okay, just to address any concerns, before we get started, I am going to make sure this weapon is clear, unloaded, and ready to be cleaned and worked on. So the first thing you probably have already noticed is I don't have a magazine in here, and you would immediately recognize the banana-shaped 30-round magazine if it were sticking out of the firearm. It has been removed. The weapon is on safe. I'm going to take that off of fire just so I can open it up and look down in the chamber and make sure it is clear. Now, being an AK guy, I should be doing that proper. For those of you holding grudges against me, so I can look down in there. I can confirm that the chamber is clear. There is no ammunition in the firearm, and we are indeed ready to break it down and clean it. So let's get started. Okay, here we are with our Arsenal SLR-101S AK-47, and we've made sure that the weapon is indeed unloaded. You can see it's on safe here with the lever up. I'm going to go ahead and flip that down to fire. We're going to need to do that in order to break this thing down. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cleaning rod out here that resides beneath the barrel. And if you've got a brand new shiny AK-47 like this is close to being, you're likely going to have, or you're supposed to have, a cleaning rod with your AK-47. If you're buying an older, used, or a surplus AK-47, there's a good possibility you're not going to have this cleaning rod. But nonetheless, technically speaking, AK-47s are supposed to come with their own cleaning rod. And so this resides up here, and I'll show a picture here coming up next real quick. This resides up here, nestled in its own little lockdown area to keep it from coming out on its own. And so what we're going to do is we're simply going to pull up, in this case, and away from the barrel, and then slide it forward. If we don't pull it up, like I said, it kind of rests in this place here. So I need to pull it up to get it out of its little nestled, locked-in area, and then I'm going to pull it forward. And that is the first step in breaking down an AK. Not necessarily has to be done first, but it's where I like to start. So I'm going to set that aside. I'm not going to be using the included cleaning rod, but it certainly comes in handy if you're having to field clean the inside of your barrel. The next thing is we normally would be removing the brake, the muzzle brake here on the end. In order to do that, I would simply push in the detent spring here and then back that muzzle brake off. We're not going to do that for this cleaning. I'm confident that I can get the barrel clean enough for this type for this time, but just so you know, you got to push in the detent spring. And then with the AK-47s, they are left threaded. They are left threaded. So what does that mean? So you may or may not have heard the old adage, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Well, with the old AK-47, it's opposite of that. So if I want to tighten it down, I'm going to need to go to the left or counterclockwise. If I want to loosen it up, I need to go to the right or clockwise. So it's completely backwards from anything we're used to here in the US, but I wanted to point that out, and that's something that you'll want to keep in mind. Again, it's left threaded. Something else for those that are interested in swapping out the brakes for compensators or suppressors, it is a 14 millimeter thread set on here. So coming up next, we've got to get the receiver cover off. That's this piece of stamped metal here. It's a relatively thin piece of metal, and its entire purpose is to serve as a dust cover to everything inside the receiver, as we'll see here in a minute. I simply call it the dust covers, as many do, but technically it is the receiver cover. In order to get this thing off, I'm going to need to push this button in here. Technically, this is actually a lug on the back of the guide, but most everyone refers to it as the button. In order to get the dust cover off, I'm going to need to push in on this button, and you can see it kind of catches there on that upper lip of the dust cover. So all I'm going to do to get that button to go in is just slightly lift up on the dust cover and go ahead and push it, and then voila, the dust cover comes off. I'm going to set that aside, and now we can see everything inside the receiver. We have the recoil spring, the guide, and you'll see the guide rod here in a minute, along with the back side of the bolt carrier and just a little bit of the bolt tail sticking out there inside the bolt carrier, but we'll get that here in a minute. So the next thing I need to do is remove the guide and recoil spring. And I'm going to use that same lug or button and push forward. And hopefully you can see here that there are some lips on the bottom of that piece that fit in their own little slots in the receiver, in the milled receiver. And I'm just going to push that button forward, and hopefully you can see those lugs, those ledges coming forward. And I want to hold on to this piece because the spring is attached. And what I'm going to do now is pull out the guide rod, and that recoil spring all in one piece, as you see here, and I'm going to set that aside. Next is the bolt carrier and bolt, and the bolt carrier is attached to the piston. And as you may or may not know, the AK-47 is a gas piston operated weapon as opposed to DI. We won't get into that, direct impingement. We won't get into all of that right now. But what I need to do is I need to make sure the fire selector is indeed down in the fire position. That's first. And then either the charging handle or the bolt carrier itself I'm going to bring back. And hopefully, I'm just going to slide it all the way back, and you'll see It's all one piece coming out of the gas tube and the receiver. The bolt carrier and the piston are together in this case. And then if you flip the bolt carrier upside down, you'll see the bolt here. And the way that you get that out is to rotate it. I believe it should come out counterclockwise. Yeah, so you're going to go counterclockwise, looking at it upside down. I'll show you here in a minute. I'll pull it forward. This foot right here fits into this groove. So you're going to put the tail of the bolt back into the carrier, rotate it around to that foot's there, and then hopefully it'll work. Yep. So again, this foot goes into that groove and locks into place. But we need to take that out for cleaning. So that is the bolt carrier. Of course, it has the charging handle attached and the piston. And then the bolt comes out separately. So I'm going to set those things aside. And at this point in time, we have this AK-47 broken down as far as we need to clean it up. As far as the receivers goes, the next thing that I want to do, that I need to do to make sure that I get all the parts accessible so I can clean them well, is I need to remove the hand guard. And it's the hand guard here. It sits on top of the forend, or what I call the foregrip. This is the hand guard up top though, because it covers the gas tube. And it covers the gas tube for good reason. That gas tube gets super hot. So we need to take that off. Now, it locks kind of into a dimple on the rear sight base. So I need to swing this switch. It's essentially a switch, but it's the handguard retainer, or retainer lock. It's like I said, it's basically a switch. I can get a pair of pliers and move this up. So again, it's going to need to go clockwise and swing to upwards position. I can get a block of wood or similar and push it under this lip here and to break it out of that dimple and move it up. It's very tough to do by hand. You might be able to get it to move a little bit, but ultimately you're going to need some assistance. So one of the things that you can do is you can take your bolt carrier and piston housing, and opposite of where the charging handle is, it would help if I show you. I'm going to flip it over, and here on this side of the bolt carrier is a groove, and I can take that groove and put it over that little tab in the lock, and I can then move that up and out of the way. And I don't want to just stop. I want to keep going because it needs to be mostly out of the way in order to remove the hand guard here in the gas tube. So once you get that up, it doesn't have to be exactly 90 degrees, but it needs to be past the top of the rear sight base. I can then pull up on the gas tube and hand guard. Of course, I say that. And there is the hand grip and gas tube. You might want to move this back a little less than 90 degrees. Clearly that was causing me some issues. But this is your hand guard and gas tube. And now we have this AK-47 broken down to the point of where we can clean everything we need to on it. So stay tuned. We'll look to punch the barrel next. Okay, next we're going to punch the barrel. You don't necessarily have to punch the barrel next. It's just what I do some of the time. Some of the times I start wiping down, spraying down some solvent. In this case today, we're going to be using the Slip 2000 line of products. They're 725 degreaser and they're gun lube. And the gun lube is essentially a CLP, so we're going to use it for everything, including punching the barrel, cleaning out the barrel. You can certainly use the cleaning rod that came with your AK-47. If you have a newer AK that happens to have the cleaning rod associated with it, you can use a cleaning rod to clean the AK-47 like any other pistol or rifle. You're likely going to need to go in through the muzzle end, since there's really not enough room to get a long rod through the chamber end of the barrel. But this is another case where I like to utilize a bore snake, because it doesn't matter. You can come in from the chamber side of the barrel very, very easily with a bore snake. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this gun lube, and I'm simply going to apply it here to the brushes embedded in the bore snake's rope, as I call it. And I'm going to simply run that down through the barrel from the chamber side, putting in the brass weight first. Give it a little weight to pull the string through the paracord end of the, as I call it, bore snake. I'm going to feed that down through the barrel. Of course, this is easier if it's angled up, to easier, and then you can see it come out the end. And I'm simply going to pull the bore snake through the barrel that way, if it'll cooperate here and not get locked up. I'll pull that through. Now, the bore snake size to use is their .30 caliber. And technically the 7.62 by 39 bullet is slightly larger than a .30 caliber. Like .30 caliber is .30, and the 7.62 by 39 bullet diameter is somewhere in the .31 to 312 range, as I understand. But you're not going to have to go up to a 35 caliber bore snake. The .30 caliber will work fine. And so what you want to do is pull that through somewhere around 10 times. If it's super dirty, maybe more. But it's as simple as that. So we'll move on to spraying everything down with the solvent and letting it soak and wiping it down next. Stay tuned. Okay, we're back, and one of the things that we're getting ready to do is spray all the parts down with a good solvent. In this case, we're experimenting a little further. We've used it a few times. It seems to do really, really well. The smell can be a little off-putting at first, so be sure you utilize these products in a well-ventilated area. But we're going to give the Slip 2000 725 a rundown on the AK. And so what I want to do, and we're not going to bore you showing you everything that we're doing here, but what we're going to do is simply spray it down. Get these parts off of here. We're going to spray everything really well, down really well, and then we're going to let it sit for a few minutes. And then what I like to do is, when the time comes to scrub it, is I want to take my nylon brush and give it a good scrub down, and we're going to spray basically anything metal down with the solvent and let it soak. So while I do that, I'm going to cut away here so not to bore you, and we'll be back with next steps. Okay, while we've got everything soaking in the solvent, I want to take a moment and talk about the gas tube. You need to clean, you're going to likely need to clean the inside of this when you do clean the weapon. Some of the questions sometimes come through, well, what do you clean the gas tube with? And it's easy enough with a bore snake for a 12 gauge, and you can probably actually use the bore snake for a 20 gauge too. Yes, they make bore snakes for shotguns. And so the way that I would do that is I would take my CLP, in this case the Slip 2000 gun lube that we happen to be using this time around. And the same way that I would clean the barrel out, I'm going to take a little CLP, whatever I happen to be using, and I'm going to put it on the bristles embedded in the bore snake's rope. And then I'm simply going to pull the bore snake through the gas tube. So I'm taking my weight, same as I would the barrel. Obviously it's very short by comparison. And then I'm going to pull that bore snake through the gas tube. And the 20 gauge may pull through a little bit easier since it is obviously going to be a little bit smaller in diameter. But sorry about bumping the camera. But as you can see here, you can pull through a 12 gauge bore snake just fine. Just lift some weights the week before you get ready to do this job so that you can pull it through with less effort than I am having to do right now. But as you can see, this is a very effective way of cleaning out that gas tube. Hopefully you can see down in there. There's people that talk about spraying the solvent, spraying some solvent down in there first, and that's a good idea if it's especially dirty, if you've shot a lot of rounds and you haven't cleaned it, which you should be doing regularly. But if you haven't, you can spray some solvent down first. There's some folks that use Q-tips and similar. You can get some really long Q-tips to use that to scrub out once you spray the solvent down in there. But nothing says that you can't spray the solvent down in there and then run the shotgun bore snakes through there and clean that out. And that brings up a really good point that I want to mention in the context of the gas tube, since the gas tube can get kind of dirty in time and depending on the number of rounds you've shot. So as I jokingly mentioned earlier, if you could load rocks into an AK-47, it would likely shoot them if you could. It's just that strong and reliable, I think, and a lot of people think. But with that being said, there's all kinds of ammo that you can run through this because it is such a simple mechanical wonder, the AK-47. It shoots a diverse range of ammunition. I'm going to set this down, the gas tube down. And so a lot of your less expensive ammo came from Russia at a point. I think that's since been banned in the last several years, unfortunately. And some of that ammo is good and some of that ammo is bad. Now, if you're talking about tool ammo or wolf or bear, generally with those guys, you've dealt with non-corrosive ammo. But some of the Russian and otherwise, some of the surplus ammo for the 7.62x39 can be extremely corrosive. And so it's important that if you are shooting some of that cheap surplus ammo, or you still happen to be one that's lucky enough to have some of that surplus ammo alone, if lucky is the right word, you want to be sure and clean your AK-47. I'm going to recommend within 24 hours after shooting that corrosive ammunition. The reason being is because corrosion, like for example inside your gas tube, can start to form in as little as 24 hours. So if you're shooting less than optimal ammunition, I would say you want to make it a point to clean the AK-47 within the 24 hours of you shooting it. Again, if you're shooting the better stuff, you don't have to worry about that so much because, again, the AK-47 generally will eat anything you feed to it, but you do want to take extra special care of cleaning your AK-47 if you happen to be using some corrosive ammo. So as we're cleaning our AK-47s, I just want to point out a couple of things in no particular order that you want to be cognizant of and cautious of as you clean. So this is our bolt. We want to make sure this thing gets sprayed down with whatever solvent or CLP we're using and cleaned. It can get dirty just like everything else in the AK-47. But one thing we want to try to avoid is soaking down the face of the bolt with a lot of oils or CLPs, cleaners, We want to keep this area fairly dry. We can still clean it by just kind of bringing some extra off the back or whatever on a rag and wiping down the face on its own, but we want to avoid soaking this area down. And then the other thing that I want to mention, and if you've shot your AK a lot, you probably already are aware, but as you shoot an AK, because it is a gas piston operated weapon, the piston is going to get filthy, especially if you shoot a lot. So you can expect when you tear down your AK and clean it, that you're going to want it, or at least plan to spend some extra time on the piston, getting it clean or mostly clean. And look, it's an AK. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean like perhaps some other weapon systems have to be. The AK will run pretty much through thick and thin, whatever. But I'm just saying that if you shoot a lot, you're going to want to expect, and you can expect to need to spend extra time getting the piston clean again. So just know that that's something that comes along with owning an AK-47. We've punched the barrel, we've punched the bore of this weapon, we've sprayed everything down with solvent that we have, our Slip 2000 725 degreaser. We've wiped it all down, it's had time to air. We've cleaned out our gas tube. We've got our piston near spotless, though you can still see some buildup and staining, so just know that's part of it. But at any rate, before we get ready to put this thing together, of course, my fire selector should still be down in fire. And the other thing that I want to note, while you're wiping everything down, you may have depressed the trigger, which caused the hammer to go forward. And so before you get to putting everything back together again, you're just going to want to make sure that hammer is back again, which kind of cocks the trigger. You just want to make sure that hammer is back again in its down state, versus if I pull it real slow and hold on to it, if I pull the trigger, the hammer goes forward, which is what obviously fires the weapon. I'm just saying, before we reassemble, we want to make sure that's back and down again. Okay, as we're getting ready to wrap up cleaning up this wonderful AK-47, it is time to lubricate. And if you consult the user's manual, it will generally point out all the official areas that you want to be sure to get a good oil, grease, or CLP on. Yes, grease comes into play, and even using some automotive greases, because the price is right, may be an option. There are some limitations to grease versus oil that I won't get into here now. I would recommend, unless you're out somewhere and cannot get to your gun cleaning supplies, personally, I would recommend using a good gun cleaning oil or CLP. Most of the time is what we have available these days to lubricate the spots. But like any other firearm, the first thing I want to do is find a good oil or CLP. In this case, we're using the Slip 2000 gun lube, which in my opinion seems to be pretty good, even though I typically like frog lube on my things. But in order to lube the firearm, the first thing I'm doing besides looking at the manual is I'm looking for places of metal on metal wear. And if you can't see it in this video, all on the top of the receiver here, there's all kinds of wear, even down inside here, the face of the hammer. So right off the bat, I know those are places that I want to get some lubrication on. Now, do I want to over lubricate any weapon? No, and the AK-47 will run pretty much in any state, but I still want to avoid over lubrication, because I don't want the gunpowder and lead and carbon buildup to get mixed up in that excess oil and lube and create a sludge that might inhibit the firearm for running as well as it normally should and ought to run. So I don't want to overdo it, but I certainly want to make sure that I get those places covered. So I like to take my CLP that I'm using and put some on my finger and then just touch along these places. And I don't want to cake it up, but any place certainly that I see bare metal showing through, I want to make sure there's at least a little bit of lube on there. So that's what I'm doing now, is I'm just looking for the bare metal scratches, right? And that's a good place to start when it comes to figuring out where you need to lubricate, especially if you haven't done it before. And you know, after the first time you clean a weapon, you're going to be stripping down all of that factory lube and oil and grease that they may put in these things. And so it's going to be up to you to make sure you get the high wear spots covered again. So that's what I'm doing. And I think I've got that inside of the receiver done pretty well there. Again, looking for those bare metal spots. On my bolt carrier and piston, I'm going to keep it off the piston, but you can see some wear here on the carrier. So I'm just going to wipe a thin coat on that. And yes, it's a little wet right now, but I'll rub it all over and spread it out. So don't worry, I'm not caking it on. I'm not looking to cake it on. Again, the bare metal spots, the wear on wear, the coating, the bluing, the paint, the Cerakote, whatever it is on the weapon, you can clearly see the bare metal. At least I hope you can in the video. And let's not forget the bolt. Again, I'm avoiding the face of the bolt, but you can see the wear back here on the, I'll call it the tail of the bolt that's going to fit inside the carrier. I'll wipe that down. I'm going to get some up here towards the front, but not on the face. Again, you can see bare metal. So there's your sign. There's your clue that you need some lube on those spots. Don't have to use a brush. Don't have to use Q-tips. Nothing fancy. Just getting it coated with your fingers, all you need to do. So with that, we'll come back and get this thing reassembled. Okay, we're back to reassemble, and so what I've done or tried to do is make sure points that are going to be covered, of course we've covered down in the receiver. I'm also going to cover here in this portion of the barrel since it is beneath the handguard and I can't get to it without breaking down the weapon. I'm going to wipe out here the end of the gas chamber as well here before I reassemble. And you don't necessarily have to do everything in a particular order, but I'm going to try to just reverse what I did to get it apart the first time. And so I'm going to choose to put the gas tube and handguard back on first. And so if I don't drop this off my table, I'm going to line this tube up with the back end of the gas chamber here. That tube should slide right over that, the top of that. And then I'm going to drop in the rear of the hand guard on the forefront of the rear sight base, just like that. And then again, just like bringing it up, I'm likely not going to be able to put this all the way back down in place using my finger or hand strength, but I can get it started. And then like before, I can simply take the side of my bolt carrier opposite of my handle here, turn it over and use that slot right there as a way of getting hold of that piece and moving it down. It's a little challenging sometimes. Moving it down until that gets back down into its little dimple where it started from. Hopefully you saw that. Again, you can use a pair of pliers too, but just know that with pliers you can scratch up your lever, your lock a little bit there on the end. If that's not a big deal to you, then by all means feel free to use pliers. Just out in the field or something, this is something that you know you'll have that you can use. So now I've got the lock back down in place, seated in the dimple that I took it from when I brought it up. The hand guard's back on. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start assembling the bolt carrier with the bolt and get that back into the receiver. So again, I'm going to take the bolt face forward. I'm going to slide the tail of it into the carrier. And then that foot there I'm going to take and put, before I do all this, I'm wanting to put this foot on the bolt. There's a couple, so look for the, I guess the larger of the two, or the one further back from the face would be another way to look at it. But I want to line it up with this groove in the carrier. So I'm going to put the tail in, and then I'm going to turn that foot around so it's in that groove. And now I've got the bolt back and reciprocating in the bolt carrier as it does, as it needs to. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the piston and I'm going to put it into the back, into the base, the back of the rear sight base, which is that end of the gas tube. I'm going to bring all of this forward. I'm going to kind of hold the bolt in place, and some of this can take a little finagling, but I'm going to take the carrier now and I'm going to line it up, hopefully. And it should. I might need to put that bolt back down. Push that bolt back, I should say. There we go. So the idea of that is to have the bolt mostly forward in the carrier, and then the back part of the carrier here get lined up with this opening here, so it'll just kind of drop in, and you'll know it, like hopefully you saw then. When you get it in, it'll mostly slide forward, putting the piston all the way into the gas tube. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our guide spring housing. We're going to put that back in the back of the bolt carrier. And then these lugs back here need to go back into their little slots here in the back. So I'm going to push forward on that lug, or on the button as a lot of folks call it, and line up those lugs to where it slides underneath. And you'll know you're there because you can't pull up. It can only go forward and backwards. And if it pops out, that's okay. You can just line it up and do it again. Got it into place. The next thing we're going to do is apply the dust cover, or the receiver cover, and we'll talk about that next. Okay, as we're getting ready to put the dust cover back on, I want to point out where the front lip of the dust cover needs to go, and hopefully between the pictures that I'm showing and this, you'll be able to tell. But what we're doing is, in here, hopefully you can see this ridge, and hopefully in the photo you'll be able to see it. I'm going to pull the rear sight leaf forward and out of the way just to hopefully show things a little bit better. But basically the front lip of the dust cover has to go in that recess right there. So that's what I wanted to show you. There's really nowhere else to go, but it's above the bolt carrier, but it's beneath the back side of the rear sight base. So I just wanted to point that out, what we'll be doing there next. Okay, we're getting ready to put the dust cover back on, or the receiver cover. So it's really reverse of the way that we took it off. So the front side of the dust cover, I'm going to put in that recess that I just showed you on the back of the rear sight base. And then I'm going to push down. I'm going to bring it down, and at the same time I'm going to push forward on the lug, or on the button on the back of the, and this is where it can be a little persnickety, but I'm going to make sure that front lip is where it needs to go, and then I'm going to push the rear button forward. And then, you know, as you push down the dust cover, you might get lucky and the button just popped through. The goal is that the button is all the way back. There has nowhere to go. You may have to jiggle the back of the receiver cover and the lug to line it all up, so it will come completely through its little hole back here on the back of the disc cover, but you'll know it. It'll pop through just like it did for me. The key is to make sure the front lip goes into that little slot here on the back of the rear base. So we've got that together. Just real quick, show you to get the cleaning rod back in. We did not remove the muzzle brake, so we don't have to worry about putting that back on. Again, the thing to remember here, it's left threaded, which means it's opposite of what it normally would be. But now I'm going to take my cleaning rod, I'm going to thread it through a hole here beneath the gas block. It has a nice little hole into the forend, or the foregrip as I like to call it. And then all I'm looking to do as I push back the cleaning rod is make sure it gets seated in its little housing here again. And you hear that pop. And all that housing does is keep that cleaning rod, unless I pull it away from the barrel, it keeps that cleaning rod from going forward and falling out. So with that, we've got this Arsenal AK-47 back together again, operational. Safety's working. The bolt carrier goes back as it should, I'm sure. Yep, the trigger's working. Make sure. The only other thing that I want to do is take a little CLP or whatever I've got on my rag, wipe down all the external metal surfaces again to make sure I got my fingerprints off, and make sure I've got the metal as protected as I possibly can. And with that, we have just cleaned an AK-47, one of my favorite rifle platforms for sure. If you've liked what you've seen here, be sure to like us below. Subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date with new videos we might be releasing. Come check out our website, and we really appreciate you watching us today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.